Thank you and welcome to Team Red, or from Team Red, I should say. I appreciate it's almost lunchtime. You've been sitting for a long period of time. So if you feel the need to get up and stretch, please do so. We'll continue to talk anyway. As Yellow Team touched on, they've already addressed some of the issues that we were actually looking at as well. But I guess we're looking at more from the compliance side of things. So what that meant for us is, how do we actually increase the availability of spaces for the people that need them and reduce, I guess, the fraudulent use of those spaces? Yep, so that's what we looked at there. Okay. So what were the success factors? Well, success factors for us was actually, as I just mentioned then, increasing bay availability. Oh, they're standing the other way. What am I doing wrong? And the way to measure that was actually looking at the bay usage pre and post implementation of the programs that Yellow Team mentioned before, or Gold Team, sorry, and my apologies. And then actually hoping that those increased bay availabilities will increase user satisfaction for people like Emilio that need those bays on a daily basis. So, a sneak peek. What did we come up with? Well, using existing digital background that we've already got and leveraging or harnessing new technologies, as David referred to, we want to be able to not only keep control of the permits in the hands of those that use them, but also enable enforcement officers to do their job and free up their time to actually do other things. Okay, so our approach is very similar, and thank you to Team Blue for showing a video of that. So just imagine that, but with red T-shirts. It was very manic. Some of the very important exercises we did was actually around empathising and experience mapping, and that's what really showed the areas that we needed to work on. And Emilio played two roles in our team, and I do apologise, I didn't introduce our team. Emilio is the president of the disabled. What's that, Emilio? Yeah, and he played an important role actually being a team member to come up with ideas, but also to test those ideas for us and say, is that going to work? So we're very lucky to have Emilio on board. So that actually led us to come up with some sketching and storyboarding and come up with a similar thing to what Yellow Team did. We didn't actually get to work closely together, so it just shows you that the need is there for a simplified way for people to not only apply for a permit, but to manage that permit once they have it, and enable compliance to be upheld as well. So that brings us to where we are now, which is the most important step, which is sharing with you.
Yeah, so before we got into the solution, we had a quick insight into the abusers and the enforcers, looking at factors, what might contribute to both sides of it. Firstly, the reasons behind the abusers, why they might do it, and the constraints that the enforcers might have, all encapsulated in fraudulent use, which is what we want to try and reduce. First of all is the abusers or the non-compliant parkers. It could be as simple as it's raining, I don't want to get my hair wet. They just want to park. Blue Bay, it's up by the entrance. Great, pop in and out. It might be as deep as they know their friend Jimmy's got a DPP. They get an infringement, they write into the local council and they'll get off. Because I know that a few local enforcement agencies, they are pretty lenient on this matter. So that's probably a contributing factor. That's what we want to try and tighten up on. And also the enforcement officers, it's where there's a bay with no permit, it's easy, you can see it straight away. Factors are, it might have slipped off. I know a number of councils have different adhesives to try and put it on the windscreen. That's also a factor. But in terms of trying to stamp out the abuse, they can't actually camp out at the bay. They can't wait for people to return. So that they got those constraints. So the actual real hardcore abuse, it's pretty hard to detect. And there are those constraints. They might not patrol the area. They might have non-compliant signs. So there's a number of factors that might contribute to them not being able to enforce properly. On top of the insights, we had a few considerations throughout the process. One was the transition process as a whole, getting stakeholder buy-in at all sorts of levels. The possibility of not having a visible permit. What does that look like? How does that work? Communication at all levels, and when it does go live, the support and transition services and education available. That's a key part of it. Technology, It's got to be simple for all users, the enforcement for the permit holders, for the back-end users, pure and simple. Device and data accessibility. Not all users have a smartphone. They might have a black spot, not in Telstra areas, obviously, but there are some around. It's got to be a stable system. Yeah, if it's being used 24 hours a day, it's got to be stable. Budgets, that's always a factor. There are other factors like interstate and international travel by DPP permit holders. If there's not going to be a physical permit, how does that look like? And also with the centralized system that we're going to propose is the actual proactive data analysis and detecting of fraudulent behavior. There's a lot of reactive stuff. Can we do proactive stuff with the data? The option should be limitless. And what role do private car parks and shopping centers play? Because a lot of these bays are in these black zones where there's not really any enforcement, and that's also a topic that's got to be considered. Yeah, so on to our main recommendations with Mara.
Hi, everybody. It's on? Yep.
My bad.
Thank you. So just so that we all have one version of the truth today, if you have a parking permit displayed in your dashboard, it shows that you are entitled and also eligible for that car park permit and that you have a disability. So what's the issue with that car space? Sorry, thank you. So what is a concern? Currently there are 79 different councils and each council has a different permit. That means that it's impossible to know which one is accurate. So you can move across borders within councils and you actually don't know which parking permit is the correct one. So that leaves it open to misuse. So if we'd like to increase the compliance, and we ideally want to get to 100% compliance, meaning that everyone who has a disability is able to, they are only able to park in a disabled car space. How do we move towards that goal? So one of the ways is to punish them, meaning that you are able to issue an infringement, that there's confidence around that infringement and that infringement gets paid. So how do we know that the issue of that permit is actually associated with that car space? So earlier we heard about understanding the driver in which location, driving which car. And so that's an important link. And I think that link is really difficult to get to in the first stage. So we've taken a phased approach to this. And we've talked about this over a 3-year horizon. So the goal team earlier talked about a centralised system. We'd like that centralised system being called My Permit. We'd like to have an option within that system that allows you to, as a user or as a holder of a disabled parking permit, be able to nominate a registration that you will, or a car under a particular registration that you will be travelling with on that day. Within a day, you can change the registration many times, but that means that as a user, you have control over who is taking you somewhere, who's picking you up, and you get to manage that all through a centralised system. So now not only are you registering your details, you're actually registering registration with that. And then into Horizon 2, we'd like to move into so the first horizon is really looking at a portal, and we understand that not everyone's digitally savvy, and so we have to find non-digital solutions to this as well to make sure that we get 100% adoption. So we're looking at voice to text or text, but non-digital options that allow you to change a registration based on a user's account. Into Horizon 2, we're looking at the use of the mobile phone in order to enable technology and car park hardware, and we talked earlier about the collection of data and open data in order to improve services. So an app to allow you to do that. And then in Horizon 3, as we're talking about community issues and parking and journey services and smart bays, which you'll hear about in a second, how do we actually use how do we iterate through this product and its development to solve broader community issues? So improve journey services, improve car parks. We know that car parks are an issue anyway. So how do we actually use this to solve broader community issues and look at community as a holistic view? So in terms of some of the features for My Permit, we're talking about a secure account, so a centralised account that lets you manage your permit, lets you manage your trip, so nominate your vehicle. Integration into other systems, so we're not assuming that we will build this ourselves from scratch. So who are the other government agencies that we can leverage? So VicRoads have a VicRoads portal. Is that something that we can leverage to build the concepts across the Gold and the Red team on an existing government portal? How do we engage public sector as well when we're developing this app? So how do we share the permit? So how do you share the permit for the drive with the as a disabled parking permit holder? How do you share that permit with your other carers or other taxis, or how do you make that experience really easy for the holder? How do you improve the end-to-end user experience? So create the awareness of a permit conditions with easy access and personalised information on that one system. So obviously mobile enforcement is another important component, and I'll pass over to Alice.
Thanks, Mara. Alrighty, so you would have heard from, oh, okay, thank you. You would have heard from Mara around the phase one, which is around a web portal. So as part of, to complement that phase one, we're talking about a mobile enforcement app. So this is an application that allows enforcement officers to check whether a parked car is authorised to park in a disabled parking bay using just a camera on the mobile device. So what we're proposing here is, as you would have heard from Sean, currently officers, when they go and inspect a car, they're not able to visibly sometimes see the permit itself. And even when they see the permit, they're not able to validate whether that's an authentic permit. So with this mobile app, we're allowing the enforcement officers to scan a plate, so scan the registration, and be able to get data in real time. Additionally, this application will integrate with the existing enforcement systems so that the enforcement officer is able to issue a fine on the spot. Next slide. So the benefits of this enforcement app is that it simplifies the decision-making process for the officer. It provides the officer with additional verification information, so they can check whether the car is actually registered or not registered. And also, with the data that it collects, it's able to build additional intelligence. So it allows us to have a better understanding of drivers' behaviours and help us in terms of being able to implement compliance via targeted initiatives. Additional to phase or the Horizon 1, we're proposing a My Permit app. So with this application, it complements a web portal, and the aim of this is to streamline compliance by leveraging off technology. So some of the technology that we're talking about is around, sensors and beacon devices, so that within a disabled parking bay, are we able to detect, whether an authorised vehicle is parking there or not parking there without an officer going to the actual bay. Additionally, with this application, it will provide the user, which is someone with, who has a valid permit, to be able to go and locate where these parking bays are. At the moment, when we asked Emilio, how did you find a parking bay when you drove into the city? Without kind of knowing where these parking bays are, currently Emilio isn't able to easily find a disabled parking bay within the city or in the suburbs. So if we have an application with Google Maps where we can, where Emilio could go today, okay, I'm driving to 242, there's 2 parking spots on Russell Street, and he's easily able to navigate through the city from your home to the city and park in one of those disabled bays. So what we're looking to do with the My Permit app in Horizon 2 is to use technology to simplify the lives of not only people who need the permit, but also enforcement officers who need to patrol the actual city. So I might pass on to Sean.
Supporting recommendations. We had a great team. We had some great recommendations. Some involved laser beams, some involved catapults. You name it, we came up with it. So it's not all about the software. We'd love to do a few diagrams, but we just can't. There were two other key recommendations as a team we came up with that probably supports the software. One of them would be the legislation and tweaking that, and another one would be education. So I'll cover the stick part. The current legislation and enforcement, we took the view of if you increase penalties and possibly demerit points, it might be a bit more of a deterrent. I know the current dollar value for parking in a disabled bay without a permit is $158. You double that, you triple that, it doesn't make people think twice. We're of the opinion it probably will. But on that view also, it might give more incentive to the enforcement agencies to actually spend a bit more time to ensure compliance. Yeah, so it's double-edged sword. So as I said, increase the current penalty value, triple it, double it. The people that know how to do this would have the best answer. Also an introduction of additional offences. Right now there's just one for parking in a bay without a permit. Is there a possibility of having one specific for altering, copying, failing to return? There's a possibility for that. Another one is possible demerit point system, more of a deterrent. I know it's currently operating in New South Wales, lesson to be learned possibly. And also, as I said, there's 79 local government enforcement agencies. Each one will have a different approach, different guidelines. So more consistent and firm enforcement and prosecution across the board might be a good way to go down too. These ones don't cost a lot of money, just a bit of effort and the right people saying yes. So that's obviously worth pursuing in our opinion. So that's enough for the stick. So now to the education part, to Ange.
Thank you, Sean. Some 22 years ago, after the birth of my first child, my partner and I agreed that we'd like our kids to grow up doing the right thing because it was the right thing to do and not because of fear of punishment. So that being said, let us lessen the occurrence of non-compliance by introducing strategic interventions that get rid of the motivations to do the wrong thing and, get rid of the jerks. So some ways to do that is to extend on existing partnerships and programs that are in schools, particularly I'm thinking of the ones in Year 10 around driver safety. Introducing new programs to primary school children to teach them empathy so we actually grow better citizens. If they grow up thinking it's the right thing to do, they will do the right thing. Having some smart campaigns around what it means to be disabled and having to coexist in a world that's not always friendly to those that have mobility devices. And that we're all familiar with the rhino and the tram, dumb ways to die. Alongside that, having catchy hashtags that enable the community to engage in the conversation online. More importantly is the strategic placement of such campaigns that quite often should be at the point where the crime happens the most often, which is at the shopping centres or the medical facilities, at the cinemas, at the train stations. So it's front of mind for someone. If they do park in the wrong spot, they get out, they walk inside, they see it, maybe they'll go back and move their car if they haven't been pinged in the meantime by our new technology. So I'll hand you back over to Mara on a roadmap.
Thank you. So lastly, the roadmap. So again, 3 horizons, assuming 3 years. Starting off with a platform being my permit and an officer's app that literally allows you to verify that car that's parked within a disabled parking bay is eligible to park there. The benefits in doing that, it could potentially make the physical permit redundant. Do we need it anymore now that we have a digital solution and we're checking the actual registration and we know for sure it belongs there? So that's an option. It's easy for permit holders to manage and change their transport. So it's very easy from a user perspective. and it removes any ambiguity around enforcement. And increases compliance of correct use. In Horizon 2, we talked about the development of a mobile app and linking that to a permit to a car park and reducing the effort on the enforcement side of, oops. And in Horizon 3, we talked about the benefits being about end-to-end mobility as an experience for the greater community. So in terms of the features that would be delivered each year, in the first horizon, we're talking about managing registrations, ensuring that education is developed and that you're able to nominate drivers, and you also have an option, as an example, text to designate registrations. In Horizon 2, we're talking about features such as biometric verification. So how do you actually improve the verification process through modern technology? Non-compliance notification, so an instant notification to a mobile app, and the use of smart bays, so using beacons or sensors in bays which connect with the app. And in Horizon 3, just building on the smart bay idea, so book a bay being an option, smart fines, automatic fines, so potentially we don't need enforcement officers out within the councils. Just general parking solutions and mobility as a service, that greater journey opportunity. So on behalf of Emilio, Naomi, Stuart, Joe, Janet, Alice, Sean, Angela and myself, thank you so very much for your time.
Great job, Red Team, and I'm a bit sorry I sort of jumped the gun, but I can see now how the two teams had worked together and where both of those ideas sat so beautifully together in terms of the infrastructure required and this idea about geolocation. So congratulations on all of that. I did want to make comment, which you obviously picked up on, that so often in government we think we're the experts and we do stuff that builds policy and programs and services, that we then apply to people without actually talking to the people who are going to use those services and getting them into co-construct or co-design those services with us. The design thinking process and the ideas behind the methodologies we've used over the last 2 days really lend itself to that, and I think this group was obviously really benefited from having Emilio, a user in the group, to actually think about what the implications are for real live actual users. So I think you had an unfair advantage there, Red Team, in a lot of ways. I really like, though, there was an early slide that you talked about motivations and feelings and so on, and that kind of lends itself to this whole idea of nudge theory, nudge economics. How do we get people to change their behaviours? We need to understand their motivations, their feelings and their emotions first, and that's not stuff we talk about very well in government at all. And I really liked, obviously, the way that you used highly personalised services, geospatial, real-time data to provide better services to the clients we're trying to provide it to, the users of the service. That's why I use the Qantas Assure app, and I'm happy to give them all my data because I know I get I get frequent flyer points, but I get better service out of it. So there's a motivation for me to do that, and we need to understand that. I've got a really complex, difficult question for you, though, in your horizons. Why do we need enforcement officers at all? Surely we can get rid of them as well because everyone's got the app and we can do citizen enforcement, can't we? Well, obviously your education is working, but frankly, I can walk along and take photos of 3 number plates parked in disabled zones. Why do I need an enforcement officer to do that? Nods, yes, maybe. Yeah, right, well, sack them. No. I thought that was going to be the answer. But I really love the way that your system really is a closed loop to build intelligence about giving better services and better outcomes to the people who most need those services and outcomes. So congratulations to your Red Team, really well done.